Merry Christmas, everyone. We're back today with Ben, and we're going to review the Hull City January transfer window and which potential targets we'd like to see, and also players who we think potentially could depart. If you could give us a like and subscribe, that would be much appreciated as we try and reach 500 subscribers as we go into 2026. So, Ben, what would you like to see happen in the January transfer window?
First of all, yeah, Merry Christmas, everyone. But yeah, I think it's going to be tricky for City to get the players that they particularly want. Obviously, with the transfer embargo that's looming over us. So yeah, I mean, there's been a few links back to Oscar Zambrano, which is an interesting one. Obviously, there's that sort of multi-club ownership with Achon and City, obviously, and then Maribor, who he's playing for now. So it'd be interesting to see if anything was to come of that. I think we've been linked with Hardy from Wrexham as well, so that'd be interesting. Whether we do need another attacking option, it wouldn't be my first choice. I think I'd probably prefer to strengthen the back line and maybe a bit in the midfield. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see the sort of the names, like the sort of caliber of players that we get linked with, because obviously we're very much restricted to either loans or free transfers. So it's a bit of a difficult situation to sort of navigate through. But I think I do have confidence that City, obviously, we've done it in the summer. We have the ability to bring in some good players, hopefully.
Yeah, I do. I agree. I think especially with the form we've been on recently, it's maybe a bit harder to think who can we replace because I think especially across the the last performances or throughout the season, there's been a lot of players who have made a good claim to BFS team member or even a regular squad member coming off the bench. So
Yeah,
I would say maybe obviously you maybe looking at a goalkeeper potentially to compete with Pando and Phillips.
yeah, I think so. I think that's been quite a big talking point for a lot of the time. When Pandor's had a bit of a shaky game, there's not really anyone. I mean, I know we do have Phillips, but we've not seen much from him, and I don't know whether he's at the level to come in and start in the championship. And there's not really anyone to fall back on if Pandor is injured or anything like that. So yeah, I think a goalie would probably be a good idea because obviously there isn't much competition there at the minute.
Yeah, and I think looking obviously at the defence as well, obviously we've conceded quite a lot of goals in comparison to other teams around us. And obviously maybe with Ajay being out for AFCON now, in AFCON until January, may potentially look at a centre back to help Hughes and Egan if potentially if one of them gets injured. Obviously we've got Firmino as well, but would that maybe be something we could be looking at?
Yeah, I think so. I think obviously after the Millwall game, Hughes had a slight knock, and it looked a little bit as if it was going to be the wrong time. And with Ajayi going off to Afcon, and we've only got Egan and Firmino to come in, so I think that's probably another pretty important area for City to get a little bit more reinforcement because right and left full back we're almost covered. I mean, we might be a bit short in terms of left full backs, but I think centre half is probably the biggest area that, along with like striker, central midfield, is the most important area that you need the backups. And I know we've spoken about it previously that we have reinforcements, but we don't actually have that many in terms of centre halves. We've got if Hughes is to get injured, for example, we've only got two to come in, and Firmino's had a couple of slight little problems himself. So yeah, I think centre half is definitely a big one for us as well, actually.
Yeah, and just sort of in terms of obviously players who could potentially leave, I think a big one you could maybe say is Brandon Williams. Obviously, it came
Yeah,
out the other week, although speaking about it, came back into sort of City News a couple of weeks ago with him in his fitness and how we might need to let him go, obviously, with the transfer restrictions and us being limited to having to let players go first before we bring anyone in. So, do you think Williams will stay, and is there anyone else you think could leave as well?
I think it's probably just a matter of time, unfortunately, before Williams. leaves. Obviously, it's a shame because I think we had some quite good expectations from what we might see for him this season, but he's not really had a chance. Obviously, his fitness is probably, unfortunately, where it is because he's had such a long period out of playing football. So, yeah, it's a shame. But like you said, it's pretty much one in, one out with City. You have to get rid of someone to free up a space for someone else to come in. Obviously, we have Matty Jacob, who had, I think he's picked up an injury, unfortunately. So there's potentially him there that when he comes back, he can be that replacement at left fullback if needed. But yeah, I think Williams is probably the number one, and in terms of who's most likely to go, I think it is a shame, but I think he is probably quite likely to leave in January, and possibly Casey Palmer as well as one that I think um, might leave because I'm not too sure on the what happened with him and Sergei, but it didn't seem to be great at the time, and whether they've got back on good terms. But yeah, I think we are quite well covered in that area, so I wouldn't be at all surprised if Palmer is saying, "Look, I want more minutes, and I'll get that somewhere else." And City are like, you know what, fair enough, that's understandable.
Yeah, I agree. I think definitely Williams may be one, unfortunately, to go. Obviously, it'd be a shame that we may not get to see him in sort of the City shirt
Yeah,
too much, but I think looking at our situation and that we've given him a chance, and if it's something that can't help us in the immediate future, and obviously with our transfer embargo, we've got to really sort of be prioritising players who we can sort of be able to play in that aspect. So obviously, there's no disrespect to
yeah,
Williams because I'm sure he's doing his best to get back to match fitness, but as they say, but unfortunately, it's just something that short term it's not really helping us at the moment, and I think with Palmer, as you say, it depends how he's maybe getting on with Jurkovic now. Obviously, it was sort of interesting that he got injured unfortunately after that when he came off against Preston, and we've not really seen whether he would have been involved in the squad after that, or obviously there was
yeah,
rumours floating around about potential issues, but hopefully there was none of that, and that hopefully he can maybe work himself back into the squad because on his day I think he's a very talented player and he can
yeah,
be of
definitely.
use to us as a squad player. But it would be interesting to see maybe if another maybe championship club comes in for him if they think they might want his services and he might feel, as you say, game time wise, he might get that somewhere else. Obviously, there's maybe a few in front of him now like JB and Cook, Slater, Hadzimetovic. So it's quite a competitive midfield that I think we've got right now. And then I suppose it's sort of tricky after that, I think, because the only other names I can really think of who could potentially depart, maybe somebody like Ndala if Man City feel like he's not getting enough minutes.
Yeah,
Obviously, I still think Ndala's can be of use to us, and he's had a few games where he's looked quite good, but it comes back to that issue of with the transfer bag we've got, do we need to maybe shift a couple of players out, and maybe that could be a surprise one or somebody else. But do you think anyone will sort of leave in terms of transfer fees, or is there any risk of Gellert going back to Leeds?
I think that's probably the biggest worry, isn't it, Gelhart? Because obviously Leeds they've started to pick up a little bit recently, but they've this so far this season they've not had that striker like City have with Gelhart that has been scoring and doing it consistently. So it is, I suppose, it's in the ball's in their court in terms of whether they want to recall him, whether they think he's up to the level to go from the Championship and straight in at the Premier League and keep scoring. I personally don't. Obviously, he's still a young lad. He's got a lot of potential, but I don't think he's there yet. Obviously, that might be slightly biased from a City perspective, but I think it would make more sense for a player of that age and that experience to carry on for the entirety of the season and finish it off, potentially go back to Leeds if they are to come down next season, or if they stay up, build on that and get put back into that squad. But yeah, I think it would be a shame if Joffrey is to go, but I think it's probably the most likely departure that we would see after Williams or Casey Palmer. But in terms of transfer fees, I know there's obviously a lot of talk about Charlie Hughes from teams in the lower end of the Premier League, high end of the Championship, they're always speaking about him, how good he is, how young he is as well. He's such a talented centre half, and I think City are lucky to get him for the fee that they did. But yeah, I think the main positive about that is that City would get probably quite an awful lot of money in terms of the sell on value, because I think he's one of those players that will have a good career ahead of him, and he's obviously young, he's English, he's got bags of potential. So yeah, I think it would be, like Joffrey, a massive shame if Hughes was to go, but I think the most likely time for him to go might be the summer window, depending on where City are at the end of the season. But yeah, I think Hughes is probably in a lot of struggling teams in the Championship in their shopping basket. So yeah, I think it's we'll have to see. It's one of them. We don't know whether someone's going to come in with a massive bid that City can't really turn down, unfortunately, in the circumstances they're in.
Yeah, exactly. I think especially obviously, as you say, with the fact that we may want to generate some more finances and obviously maybe get the EFL off our backs. Hopefully, maybe something we can maybe come back to in the summer and see where we are and whether there's any sort of interest in the Premier League for Hughes. Just to touch upon sort of, I suppose, somebody who, going back to the Gelhardt point, I would say as well, in terms of how team players moving halfway through the season. Obviously, we saw Louis Barry at Stockport last season, started off really well. Villa cut his loan short and he came to us, and then obviously he got his injury and things didn't really work out. Is somebody who's sort of come back into sort of the rumours of coming back to City maybe after sort of an unsuccessful spell at Sheffield United up to now. Do you think he's somebody who would be of interest, or is there anyone who do you think he would be sort of welcome back?
It's interesting, that one, because I think he did show in the very short amount of time we had him, obviously because he did, like you say, get injured very early into his spell with City, but I think he did show the ability that like he is a top level player, but so long as Liam Miller is able to stay fit, I can't see anyone knocking him off that starting position. So it will be interesting to see if City were to go back into him, because I know, like you said, they've been quite heavily linked as one of the very many teams that are interested in getting him on loan. But yeah, I think in terms of if it was a permanent signing as like a backup option, I'd understand that. But I think it would either have to be one of Miller or Barry that has to start week in, week out. And I don't think it would be worth City, in the circumstances they're in, to sign someone on a loan and almost waste a loan spot on a position that they already have a very top quality player in Liam Miller. So I think it'd be interesting to see where that one leads. But I personally wouldn't. I mean, I'd welcome him back, but I wouldn't go so far as say he'd come in and start, because Miller is there and he's shown us his quality. He's been in the Championship a few seasons as well with Preston. So yeah, I think Miller is probably the one that starts, and anyone that gets brought in would be like the backup to him.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of them where it then becomes a case of, oh, how are we going to combine Barry, Miller, Bellumi, Gelhardt,
Yeah,
McBain, Joseph? Then there's we're trying to obviously try and not play them all at the same time, but trying to incorporate them all. And sometimes it can maybe get a bit sort of, I don't know if it's maybe overwhelming, or it can be sort of quite difficult to fit them all in. I think that's something we saw maybe under Lima Senior when we brought Carvalho in and then Zaroury. It was difficult. We found it difficult at first, I think, to find the right combinations all the time. So I think the January
yeah,
window has to be something. Obviously, we have to be wary of in terms of anyone sort of interest in any of our players, but also I think just consolidating what we've got and making sure we've got the similar squad to what we've got now, and be able to carry that through to this summer, and then we'll see where we go from there. But yeah, I think overall, I think January would be a success if we can keep hold of our key players, and then also maybe if we can add
yeah.
a couple of squad reinforcements, and we'll see whether we need to let anyone go from there. But thanks for joining me, Ben. Hope you have a good rest of your Christmas, and same to everyone for thank you for all for watching. And yeah, make sure to like and subscribe. And we'll speak to you next time when we're back for the next episode of Where Tigers Walk. Right. I hope I did that okay. The start was a little bit. I was a little bit like trying to get the right words out, but yeah, I assume they'll again cut off when I stop there. So yeah, I'll speak to you. Yeah, so I'll speak to you next week.
Yeah, see you in a bit, mate.
See you soon. Bye.